The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and don't necessarily reflect the views of WOWT.
Here we are once again, another episode of Becca's Talking. Thanks for joining us. Podcast brought to you by the fine folks at Havana Garage in the Old Market. Havana Garage, been around for a long time, and you don't stay in the recreational entertainment business like that if you're not doing the job right. And cigars and the whiskey selection and just the atmosphere there at Havana Garage, they're doing it right. They've been doing it right for years and years and years and years. Stop on by with all the activity happening downtown, whether maybe you just wanted to have dinner in the Old Market or one of the events at the CHI or Holland or Orpheum. Make Havana Garage a part of your night. Okay, so I'm looking forward to this podcast. This is one. I have no idea where this is going to go. My guest has no idea where this is going to go, and it could easily go off the rails.
Yeah, it easily could.
My guest is Kent Pavelka. The man needs no introduction. I mean, I think next to Tom Osborne, you've been affiliated with Nebraska's athletics longer than anybody else, right?
I hadn't thought about that. Well, there's some assistant coaches that he had that had been there as long, but yeah, there aren't many people that go back that far.
So Kent was the voice of Husker football for years, and now he does Husker basketball. But first of all, and I've known you. You and I worked together at KFAB back in the 90s, so we worked together then. And so I've known you a long time. And as the football season starts here, and now basketball season right around the corner, I thought it'd be good to have you on there to talk a little bit about Husker sports and just how things have changed over the years. So thanks for doing this.
You bet.
So you started out at KFAB right back when KFAB had the Huskers, the football game. KFAB was the flagship station, right? And you started out working with the legend Lyle Bremser, right?
Yeah, it was before we had the network. Do I have to say how long ago?
No, it was a long time ago.
A long time ago, over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
1974 is when I started, and at that point in time, there were 4 originating play-by-play announcers, 4 stations that did the games: KFAB, WOW here in Omaha, 590, and 2 stations in Lincoln, KLIN and KFOR. All 4 stations originated a broadcast, and 2 of those stations had networks across the state of Nebraska. KFAB, we had no affiliates. WOW had no affiliates, but about 10 years later, the industry there was a sea change in that colleges went to a single originating broadcast, and they had stations bid on the rights, the broadcast rights, and we won it. I think it was in '84. So yeah, about the time you came to KFAB, we had that network for a while.
You had it for a while, yeah. You had it for a while, and I was on the periphery of it a little bit. I'd help out a little bit here and there, but I wasn't so much involved in the day to day. But you started off then as doing like color to Lyle Bremser, right?
Did color with Lyle Bremser. Lyell, by the way. People refer to Lyle Bremser and they spell it Lyle like they listen to him.
Yeah.
They couldn't get his name right.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because I think that, obviously people of like our generation remember Lyle Bremser, but for people that weren't around back then, this man was legendary. I mean, and Husker football back then on the radio was legendary, wasn't it?
Well, it was. When he retired, he had done play-by-play for Husker football for 46 years. And so, he was man, woman, and child was his signature call. He was kind of a character sounding kind of guy on the air, very unique sounding. You remember listening to him, I assume.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, he had an unusual but really good voice. It was different. And but he became a legend before he was done.
And in this day and age, when you've got sports on 822 different channels and everything, and on your phone and everything, back then, if you wanted Husker football, you only got it on KFAB, and maybe on the Friday after Thanksgiving, you would get the Husker game on TV. But otherwise, all the games weren't televised, and it was on the radio. And I remember, going and actually like shopping at the supermarket on a Saturday, listening to you and Lyle over the loudspeakers as they would be playing it, because it used to be when the Huskers played, the whole state just shut down.
Yeah, you could drive around during a game, and there wasn't very much traffic on Dodge Street even.
Okay, so
but it's changed.
Yeah, it has changed, and I want to get to that. So Lyle then retires. He's out, and you become the voice of Husker football.
Right, in the mid-'80s.
In the mid-'80s,
Correct.
you become the voice of Husker football. You and Gary Saddlemeyer, right?
Right. Actually, Larry Molenbrink. You remember that name?
I know Larry. Larry and I worked together in Kansas City.
Yeah, he was at KFOR, and he was my first color guy. Gary was on the sidelines. In the second season, we had the broadcast. Gary moved into the color role. But yeah, it's a long time ago, man. A long time ago.
So talk about that. The impact that being the voice of the Huskers had back then. Because you were, not that you're not now, but you were really, big deal. Back then.
Yeah, like as you mentioned, back in those days, if the Huskers were on television 3 times a year, that was a lot. Mm-hmm. So when people had to listen to you, you became a focal point. Now, every game's on television, as you know. There are games on television starting on Thursday night through Tuesday. Football was special in that you couldn't see it on television that much.
Right.
And so, just by default, rather, as a result of games not being on TV and on radio only, people had to listen to you, and I think it was an era that was special in that listening to a game on the radio was different. You couldn't see the game, obviously, but as a play-by-play announcer, what you try to do is paint a mental picture of what's going on out on the field. And if you're good at that, that's a pretty cool thing to listen to.
Yeah, because you had to be a character. You had to be a bit of a character. You had to have, I think, more personality than just giving out the stats and everything. Take nothing away from a lot of the announcers today. Not just Huskers, but any of them. But so many of the sports announcers, at least from my perspective, are rather generic. Whereas back then you had people, whether you'd be Lyle Bremser on Husker football, or you had people like Jack Buck with, the St. Louis Cardinals baseball, or, Vince Scully and people like that. Sports announcers were something special. I think now, for the most part, it's become sort of generic, I think.
Yeah, a little cookie cutter-ish.
Yeah.
And again, there weren't very many of us back in those days. Now there are a ton of networks, a ton of announcers, and you got to differentiate between radio and television too, because TV, as a play-by-play announcer, you're the second most important guy to the analyst.
Yeah.
In radio, it's flipped the other way. The analyst or color announcer, your sidekick, better get out of the way because you've got to paint that picture and describe the game. And so I think that as a result of that, it was more special back in those days.
Let me ask you. We'll start at the beginning here for a second. Were you just a person that wanted to be in radio that got into sports broadcasting, or were you a guy that wanted to do sportscasting from the very beginning? From the very beginning.
When I was growing up in Lincoln as a 12-year-old kid, we'd play flag football while the Huskers were on the radio on a Saturday, and not flag football, but touch football.
Yeah.
And, most of the guys playing the game were interested in our game, and I was more interested in the radio that was on the kitchen, on the windowsill in the kitchen coming out the screen window. I would listen to that.
Sure.
I was more mesmerized by the radio broadcast than anything else. But that's when I decided I wanted to do that. I thought that'd be really a cool thing to do, as a 12-year-old.
So then when you finally get the chance to do that, that had to be a real rush.
Oh, it was incredible. I went to, I finished school at Lincoln Northeast, went to the University of Nebraska and graduated. Spent 3 years in Fremont at a station and kind of cut my teeth and did a lot of play-by-play. And then KFAB called me in 1974. I was a young man.
Yeah.
And, I found myself in the booth with the legendary Lyle Bremser as a 24-year-old. It was a little overwhelming.
I would imagine so.
I was intimidated for a long time.
And I don't think people realize, too, how hard that is. I did, like, when I first started in radio, I did a little color commentary for high school football. And that's a lot of work. I mean, to be able to know all the players' names, to have all the positions, to know what they're doing. I mean, you got to be on the ball. That's not just showing up and like Joe Sitchback on a Sunday sitting in front of the TV and telling the coach how to run the game. I mean, you got to know what you're doing.
But people think it is.
Yeah,
Well,
I know.
How hard can it be, right?
Right, yeah.
Just talk about the game, right? Well, no, you do a lot of prep, a lot of studying. And it's a craft too. I mean, just the ability to describe a game. You don't sit down and be good at it. You got to work at it. And then even once you get decent as in the craft, you still have to prepare for every game, every single game.
And the players change, and then you have the opposing players and the history of the coach and everything. I mean, it is a lot of work to be able to keep that story moving forward.
Right. But I still am doing it for basketball, and I'm still enjoying it. It's a little bit of a load at this stage of my life. I mean, it's a grind. It is.
No, I imagine so, especially the traveling and everything. It probably wears on you.
Yeah, we start the basketball season now starts before November. And like our first game this year, Nebraska's first game is the 20-something of October. And then if you're any good at all, you're playing into March. And once that first game hits, it's every day, Tom. I mean, I don't care if you have a game the next week or the next day. The morning after the broadcast, you're preparing for the next one. So it's 7 days a week, Christmas even.
Yeah.
But people think you just sit down and do it, right?
How hard can it be?
How hard can
it be? So you were with the Huskers, really? I mean, you were there like during the glory days.
Yep.
Because you were there. The last game that you broadcast play-by-play for the Huskers was when they won the national championship there in the '95 season, right?
Beat Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be my last broadcast, but it wound up being my last broadcast. For 10 years, I was gone.
Yeah.
And then, people talk about my friend Steve Peterson. A lot of people don't have much good to say about him, but he's the one that called me and said, "You want to come back and do basketball?" So that's another story. All those years.
I mean, we'll get to that in a minute or two, but I think you bring up an excellent point because. Yeah, when you were no longer going to be the spokesperson, the play-by-play guy for the Huskers, I mean that was front page news. That was front page news. You had, I'm sure you had people coming up to you at the gas station, talking to you about it and wanting to know what's going on. That had to really weigh on you a lot, I would think.
Well, I didn't go to work that next day. I got a call. I don't remember who called me. Said there's a story, and Warren Swain's the play-by-play announcer. It was like the night before.
Yeah,
Tom, I was depressed for a long, long time losing that gig. I probably identified, put too much into it in terms of what it meant to me. I mean, it was who I was.
Yeah.
And I was empty as an empty shell at that point in time.
Yeah.
So it was hard. It was really hard. And, I guess I kind of screwed it up. That's another story, how that all went down. You talk about it being front page news. The guy who wound up with the rights was talking to me. Well, you want to get into that or not?
Yeah, no, whatever you feel comfortable with. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty simple story. The new rights holder wanted me to go to work for him, and we had a discussion over a long period of time about whether I would or not, and talked about money, and basically, he thought I wanted way too much money, and so he hired somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair. He was like in the press talking about how, we had a boatload of money to spend and we were going to be doing everything right. I mean, he was being very grandiose about this. And so obviously you thought, okay, if there's money out there on the table, I deserve my share.
Well, God forbid you make some money in this business.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity, I thought, to get a decent salary.
And he never,
people in this industry on the air at a certain level, the people that are compensated are the salespeople, the people that go out and sell commercials.
Yeah.
They're the ones that make the bucks. And especially in radio in those days, I'd worked for 22 years. I was on the air doing football. And they wanted me. And I thought, well, how about I make some money?
Yeah.
Had one opportunity, but they weren't interested. The guy told me one night, he called me. I was in Stillwater, Oklahoma, doing a basketball broadcast the night before down in Stillwater. And he called and said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, look, I don't want our friendship. We were good friends to get in the way of these negotiations, and I don't want the negotiations to get in the way of our friendship. So I had an agent, but the man who got the rights, who we haven't named yet, but said, I can have Donald Duck do the play-by-play. He literally told me that.
Yeah.
So that was the attitude, was that the only reason he was into it was to make money, and he realized it was an exclusive broadcast. So whoever he put into the booth, people had to listen to, and he didn't care about the quality of it.
That's something too. I think that people don't understand with too many broadcasters. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot of times the broadcasters. That's it. I mean, the management, is just it's about the money. It's about the money, and they have little regard for the talent that puts them, that's making them that money.
Yeah, it's interesting in the hallways of broadcast entities, the vibe is palpable. I mean, it's like the people that are valued are the people out there. All right, I got a sale. I brought some commercial money in, and you feel kind of slighted and dissed, as a talent.
Now, you were there, like I said, for the glory days of Husker football. What is one or two of your most cherished memories of that time of being play-by-play? And then I want to get to the basketball and what you're doing now.
Well, one of the memories that is indelible that isn't so cherished was that first broadcast I did. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was so nervous, and I was nervous for a number of years doing it. I just was a mess internally. But as time went on, I got my feet underneath me, and people started to accept what I did and kind of liked it, I think, and so I felt like I was in a real groove before it was all over. And of course, the big one was in 1995 in January 3rd or whatever it was when we beat Miami for the national championship, the first of two in a row that I broadcast.
Right.
And they hadn't had one in 23 years or whatever it was since 1971 or something like that. And so I knew. Man, at the end of that thing, there was 2 minutes and 12 seconds to go, and I mean, I felt like, that was a moment of my life to be right on the air describing the national championship, And then the following year, the win over the Florida Gators. You were there. You did your show from Tempe. Just annihilated Florida. Tommy Frazier and that group. That was a highlight too.
One of my memories from that game was because I was doing like post-game broadcasting afterwards. I was going to go back to the team hotel and do some reports from the team hotel after the game. And my memory is that I was leaving to go and get out and go to the hotel while the game was still going on. As I'm walking down the concourse, was the famous run that Tommy Frazier had, where you just had an incredible broadcast of it. I've heard the play-by-play and since then, but I missed that whole run. I missed that whole moment of Tommy Frazier's incredible run.
Yeah. It was he broke so many tackles on that play, and then there was a period during the middle of that call where I broke it down to 1 yard at a time, 36, 37, 38, 40, it was you don't get material like that very often to work with. You know what I mean? The moment, the enormity of the game, and the call itself. I mean, the play itself. You better make the most of those.
And then you're not doing the broadcast anymore, and the Husker football program goes on the toilet. Is there a relationship? I'm not saying there's not. Who knows? Who knows how the cosmics work?
Actually, they won one more national championship.
No, they shared a national championship.
Yeah, with Michigan.
They did. Yeah, they shared it with Michigan. So they did.
Yeah. And Scott Frost was involved. So what can I say?
So then you did. You were not involved in Husker sports for about 10 years.
Yeah.
You had an advertising agency during that time, right? And you were doing some other stuff?
I stayed at KFAB and continued to do the morning show with Gary, and it got to the point, I couldn't stand to be in the station because we were an affiliate.
Yeah.
KFAB was a station that carried Warren Swain, and it just turned my stomach. I couldn't stand being there, so I left and went to KKAR for 4 years, and at the tail end of that period of time, did this advertising agency thing with a friend of mine, and we did that, and then Steve Peterson called me and said, "Want to come back and do basketball?" So I did the ad agency and the basketball at the same time.
Okay, and I'll get to that in a second. But you mentioned you did morning shows with Gary.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the question. I told you I had a question I've wanted to ask you for a long time, and this is it. So on the morning show, it was you, Gary Settlemeyer, and one of the nicest guys in the world, Roger Flemmer, did the agricultural reports.
Yeah.
Did the agricultural reports. I think you know where this question.
All right.
I think you know where this is going. So in radio, we had done promotions where we would go to like the ag shows and stuff like that, and it'd be like, hey, fill out this form and register to win a prize. And so it'd been like the weekend before the ag show. Roger Flemmer has, the drawing to give away the prize. Yeah, okay. And Roger Flemmer, again, nicest guy in the world, goes, and the winner is Dirk Diggler from Eagle, Nebraska. Now, for the people that remember, Dirk Diggler was the porn star in the movie Boogie Nights, okay?
Yeah, that was a character.
It was a character.
Yeah.
That was a character, yeah, in the movie Boogie Nights, okay? I have long guessed that you were the one that put him up to that.
I did not.
That you were the one that gave him that answer.
I did not. I don't know who did, but I did not. I swear to you.
Oh,
that's a classic.
That has your name written all over it.
And Roger had this unique delivery, and so he enunciated it very carefully, everything that he said on the air, and the winner is Dirk Diggler.
From Eagle, Nebraska. Maybe that might have just been the luck of the draw. Maybe some smart aleck at the ad show
could have been
did it, and he just pulled it out. But everybody just like rolled on the floor afterwards. That was
poor old Roger didn't know what he had done.
No clue.
No,
he had no clue. Dirk, if you're listening, give us a call.
Oh man, you bring that up, and it brings it back so many memories of funny stuff.
We did. We back then, and kind of like complain about how generic I think so many sportscasters have gotten now. I think the same thing is true with just radio in general. And I don't want to sound like some bitter old radio guy. It's not like I was in my day, but. But it used to be that, you had a lot more characters there. Then the big corporations bought these radio stations, and things became so much corporate. So you lost, and then automation also, and the satellite. So you lost the overnight guy who just was, completely out there. You lost so many of the characters.
Well, it's like WKRP in a way.
It used to be. Yeah. Back in the day, people that don't know, if you're familiar with WKRP in Cincinnati, that was what a radio station was like back then.
Yeah.
And it's not that anymore. But everything changes.
Yeah, the place was full of characters.
Yeah,
full of characters.
I could tell you stories about this guy, but he can tell stories about me, so it's mutually destructive. So we'll just leave it at that and move forward. But we did. We had fun.
We sure did.
We had fun. So now you're doing basketball. How is calling basketball different than calling football?
Well, first of all, there's 35 games instead of 12. So you just have a lot more games to do, and the schedule is just that more intense, 2 or 3 games a week. Mm-hmm. That's one thing, and so the preparation is intense, is as intense as a football game. If you're doing football, you do the game Thursday night in Kansas City against Cincinnati, and then you put your hat, you come home and you get ready for the following Saturday. And then you got a whole week, right?
Right.
So there's that. It's a different thing in terms of the rhythm of the presentation. In football you have 12 seconds of action and then it stops, and there's 25 seconds of no action. Basketball, it's nonstop. The ball's just it's moving all the time, and so you've got to describe it all. You can't stop
right
like you do in football. and there's not that time to fill with your analyst and whatnot. So the play-by-play guy in radio for basketball is on the air almost constantly. And it takes a lot of focus, and for an hour and a half. I mean, if you're going to do it well.
Yeah. And although you do have a color person that works with you, right?
Yeah, yes.
But because you're doing the action is so much, the color play-by-play or the color announcer really only comes in like if there's a timeout or something, right?
Well, no, they learn real quick, working with me anyway, that I'll give them this, and they need to say something in like 3 seconds. And you get good at that.
Yeah.
Saying something good in 3 or 4 or 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And I give it to them a lot, but once the ball gets thrown back in bounds, they need to shut up.
And while we talked about how after you left Husker football, the team fell on hard times. Now with Husker basketball, the team has actually gotten a lot better. I mean, when you took over for Husker basketball, there were not people that the crowds weren't there for the home games the way they are now. You were playing in the old Devaney Center. Now you got there at the Pinnacle Center there in Lincoln, and the team has gotten really good. I mean, you're playing into March now, which you didn't always do when you first started.
Yeah, you got to look back at the first segment of time that I did the play-by-play. Dan Eny was there.
Right.
I was on the air from 74 through 96. And he had good teams. He had really good teams. And then, boom, I was done with that. I mean, same thing with football. And then when I came back in, when was it, 2006, they weren't very good for a while. But, Fred Hoiberg is a really, really good coach. And I'm really excited for this season. I've been down to watch him practice 3 or 4 times, and I think he's got a really good roster. I really do. I'm
not a big fan of the NBA, but I do like college basketball.
Yeah, it's fun, man. I mean, the Pinnacle Bank Arena gets lit up, man, when there's a big game and it's a full house. It's a pretty special atmosphere. It really trumps most of the football broadcasts in terms of atmosphere. I think back to Oklahoma would come into town or Colorado, and it would be a big game, and the place was lit up. But when you're playing, South Dakota or somebody in football, and you're ahead 56-10, there's not a lot of tension there.
Well, I mean, plus just from a pure sound and the energy in the room, you're enclosed in a coliseum.
Yeah.
With a ceiling and a roof that holds the sound in. Whereas you may have 3 times as many fans in the stands for a football game, but at the same time, all that noise is going up to the heavens, and so you don't necessarily feel a lot of that same electricity that you can feel in a good college basketball game.
That's true. That's very true.
Okay. A few more questions for my friend here, Kent Pavelka, in a minute or two, but I want to tell you one more time about the folks there at Havana Garage in the Old Market. Havana Garage that has been a proud sponsor of this podcast pretty much since we started doing this over a year ago now. It's been over a year we've been doing this. I'll be darned how time flies. And they've been with us the whole time and really do appreciate it. It's got a great atmosphere there where you've got the Rat Pack with Sammy and Dean and Frank and old Blue Eyes there, but a nice cigar selection. You can go and have a cigar, have a cocktail. I myself enjoy an occasional single malt scotch. They got a great selection. Check it out in the Old Market Havana Garage. Okay, so you mentioned you've been doing this now for over 50 years. Yeah. You've been involved one way or another pretty much with Husker Athletics.
Right.
I mean, even when you weren't working, technically broadcasting for the Huskers, you were still connected to it. I mean, you never get away from that, do you?
Right. No, you don't. And it's been an interesting ride. I have a lot of thoughts about how things are today compared to back in the day, and all the things that have transpired and that are at play today with NIL and the transfer portal and I've seen so many changes in terms of the college presidents, the chancellors, the boards of regents, the coaches, the athletic directors, and it's kind of amusing in a sense to see new guys come in every 5 years and take their swing.
Well, and you mentioned NIL and transfer portal and that. It's very much like broadcasting. Broadcasting, traditional radio and TV knows that, a lot of people are getting their stuff on digital now. So you've got to be involved with this new scenario of what the media is, which it wasn't that way back, way back in the day. So you have to deal with the changes. And the same thing is true now in college sports, isn't it? I mean, what we thought we knew is no longer true, is it?
No, and the big thing right now is the change in terms of how college athletes are now being compensated, which I think is way overdue. But if you want to get into it some other time, it's probably a 10-minute conversation. But I can tell you what I think happened, and it didn't need to happen. Back in the day, athletes got room and board and their scholarship, and a lot of people thought, well, that's sufficient, right? Mm-hmm. Tom Osborne once said to me off the air, we were talking about players and money and whatnot, and there was a player by the name of Dana Brinson who was wore number 33, and he was a punt returner and receiver, and he just electrified the crowd every Saturday. And Tom said, in essence, Dana Brinson is an entertainer. He entertains 76,000 people every Saturday with what he does on the football field. So the game is over on a Saturday, and Dana Brinson didn't have enough money to fly back to Georgia for his grandmother's funeral. Now, that was wrong. Yeah. Considering all the money that was involved in college athletics and what he did. And he was the entertainment.
Yeah.
And but you had a relentless parade of college presidents and chancellors, and not just at the University of Nebraska, but at the University of Nebraska, and athletic directors and coaches who sat by and watched that happen, and it didn't need to happen. They knew all these years that they should have done something to give the players something, and they didn't do anything. And so it goes from does a 180 from one extreme to the other, and now these guys are making, some of them, 6 figures, 7 figures.
Yeah, what did I say? Bill Arreola is $3 million this year.
It's just as obscene in that extreme as it was back in those days. But my point is, you get a new chancellor or a new president, and they come in here, and like the guy that went to Ohio State, he's here, just like clockwork. You can depend on it. They take the job. There's a lot of media coverage of it. And the guy, we toured, my wife and I, we toured all 93 counties, and we really know what Nebraska's like now. We're Nebraskans, and we're in it for the long haul, and 5 years later, they're gone.
Right. Yeah.
So don't, I mean, it's like, the reason I'm responding this way is, I've sat by and watched this. But do you think that any of these people ever want to know what you think or what you know? Or what you've learned?
No, because they know.
Zero.
They know it all. Yeah.
Well, they're out with the people that are donating a lot of money.
Right.
But there's a lesson in that, when people in whatever arena you live in and you work in, the people who've been there and watched it are a valuable resource that you ought to take advantage of.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for being in it for 50 years, and so you've seen, like you said, you've seen a lot, and you've seen what works and what doesn't work. You mentioned talk about the NIL. It reminds me when the Huskers won the national championship, the '95 season, so it was 1996. They went to Washington D.C. to meet with President Clinton, and I went and broadcast from D.C. and I was there when the team, after the team had met with the president, they came to the Senate building for a little party.
Ceremony.
It's a little ceremony there with the fans from Nebraska and everything. So, you were there and you had all these Nebraska people that worked in D.C. They're in the Senate building meeting the Husker players and Tom Osborne and everything.
Sure.
And there were some players there that you recognize the names, but the clothes they were wearing to meet the president were Goodwill hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
I mean, now some of the kids had parents, that
could afford clothes.
Yeah. So they were dressed in really nice suits. But then there were other kids whose parents were not as well off.
Yeah.
And so they're showing up literally in Goodwill hand-me-downs.
Yeah. Now
to meet the president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today they're well dressed, and it's only the announcer that looks like that. Right?
Now that you mention it,
yeah. I sit on the airplane coming back, from games, and years ago, I'd look up at the front of the plane, and there'd be the coach and his assistants, and I'd think, I mean, it would be like 3 a.m, and I knew it was 20 below zero in Lincoln. I had to drive back to Omaha, and I'm thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing? And then I'd look at them, and I'd say, well, I know why they're here. They're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, now, last year, I'm looking around, and it's the players. I said, I'm the only one on this plane not making any money. Right? It's everybody. me and the equipment manager.
Yeah. And the equipment manager's got a deal too. With,
probably.
with the heating and air conditioning company. So
yeah.
So, it's
crazy, isn't it?
It is. It is, and nobody quite knows where it's going to go. Nobody even quite knows what the NCAA is going to be here another 10, 15, 20 years.
Well, that's another thing, Tom. People talk about the NCAA is their fault and they don't do anything. The NCAA, this is my interpretation of it, my opinion, is nothing more than a collection of university presidents across the country. Mm-hmm. They are the NCAA.
Yeah.
But the NCAA, quote unquote, becomes a kind of this whipping boy that, no, you're the NCAA. You make these decisions. And so you can't blame the NCAA. You blame the hierarchy, the heads of these universities.
Well, that's what I mean when I say you don't know if they're even going to be around, because these presidents of these universities have all connected with others in their leagues. So you've got the Big Ten network, you've got the Big 12 network, you've got the SEC network, you've got all of that, and so everybody's in their own little world there. And so, what kind of impact does the NCAA even have anymore? Because, as far as the rules that they can impose on people and the power that they have.
Yeah. Nobody knows where it's going to end up.
Yeah.
But it's crazy.
But it still is fun, man. I'll tell you, I look forward to the Husker football season, looking forward to the basketball season. Always enjoy the Husker Creighton game, and you've got the Jayster fans, It's
man. Don't get me started.
Oh, no, I'm a bit of a Jayster. I'll admit that, no.
I would not have agreed to do this show if I knew that.
Well, it's just a shorter drive to see Creighton to play.
Oh, man, you don't want me to go there. You do not want me to go there. Kent,
no, I'll ask you this: is this your last year doing the play-by-play? You don't know. I already don't want to say. Or,
I don't know. It's kind of season to season.
Yeah.
It's been a long haul. I'll say that.
No, it is. Yeah.
In my fantasies, my dreams, what happens is we get to the NCAA tournament again and we win a game and drop the mic. Because they've never won an NCAA tournament game. So
he was a champion, yeah.
Boom, there it is.
Kent Pavelka, the legend. I'm
honored to have been asked to do this.
And
Thanks.
I'm honored to have you as a friend. And I thank you for doing this. I thank you for doing this. And we'll get together soon and have lunch and tell some of those embarrassing stories we can't say on the podcast.
We'll get together at Havana Garage.
We'll do
How about that?
All right, take care, my friend. Hey, make sure that you follow us on Facebook. Also, subscribe and follow the YouTube, the Becca's Talking YouTube channel. On the Becca's Talking YouTube channel, I've got a lot of great podcasts up there. All of them are archived. Matter of fact, Johnny Rogers was one that we did back last year. And, with the football season's going on, maybe you want to reminisce a little bit with Johnny Rogers, Heisman Trophy winner. And a little bit of everything there. So follow the YouTube channel there, subscribe, and check us out every week with a brand new podcast with an interesting person here on Becca's Talking. Till next time, take care and bye, y'all.